So Andy, here you have a model that, you took a model that has 200 bolts and 200 nuts, and you reduced it to half a bolt. And it's part of, a very complex kind of launch vehicle. And so it's a very important engineering skill where you're taking this, this complicated application and you're reducing it to something that's, that's tractable, but will give you good results, useful results. So I wanted to talk to you about the process by which you looked at the application and then you reduced it to a model that then we can input into ANSYS.
So the very first step starts off with visualization. What am I modeling? So if I'm interested in the nozzle section, which in this analysis I am, how is it going to break? What am I looking at? Am I interested in gapping? And in that case, like what exactly do I need to model?
So you need to be really thinking about what do I want to get out of this, right?
Right. So if you close your eyes and you picture it in your mind, and you do like the large deformation where you exaggerate the deformation in ANSYS, that's kind of what I've done in my mind and said, okay, where's it going to break? And that, that's what the engineer would do, and then they would come up with a simplified way of expressing that in simulation.
Yeah. So when you're visualizing this, you would think of where would you visualize it as it would break,
yes,
or it would fail. So, because that's the thing is, that's how, as an expert, you're thinking, and I think it's very useful for beginners and students to kind of think about, okay, this is how the expert is thinking about it. So that, one of the goals of my course is to, move beyond button pushing and starting to think like an expert. And part of it is the mental picture you have.
Right. And the mental picture, if one's done a problem over and over again, the free body diagram can be done in the head. I often draw things out because in drawing this particular problem out, I see that the pressure goes into the O-ring or the ceiling cavity, and that it wants to separate those two parts. And then that helps me quite a bit because then I know, okay, I need to model this particular section as accurately as possible. The regions beyond that may not be as necessary because using St. Venant's principle, they're far away, they may not matter as much.
So, and this is based on the Saturn V. I'm a huge fan of the Apollo missions and Saturn V. So it's, and when you came up with this model, I was like, wow, this is great. Yeah. The Saturn V, just like looking at videos of it launching, it's just right. Amazing. So do you want to talk about, do you want to show us like an image of the Saturn V and
of course,
the part that you're looking at?
So here's the Saturn V rocket. It took them a long time to build. However, we're interested in kind of one section, which is at the bottom, interested in the nozzle section. Particularly, we are interested in this flange right here. This flange contains bolts and nuts, which connect these two regen nozzles together. That just made it manufacturable. So that's why they have that flange.
So this is part of the first stage, right? This is like a first stage engine.
Yes, this is the first stage. There's 5 F1 engines, and this is part of the F1 engine. Mm-hmm. And so the looking at this, it looks quite complex. How can we capture this? Well, if one's ever drawn a cartoon, you draw a circle and oval first, and then you can make the image more complex. So if I were to simplify this geometry, I see a cone. I see a conical frustrum that's hollow. In fact, I see 2 conical frustrums that are hollow that are connected by a flange that are stapled together using bolts. And certainly this is a gas generator exhaust tube, which is meant for cooling. This is meant for, this will add some stiffness to the model. These other bands over here also add stiffness. That can change the results. However, I need a rough answer. So I'm going to assume that the system is pretty simple. And in fact, just going back over my previous experience, these extra features don't really change the answer that much, because we have a bulk shape here, we have a bulk shape here, and that's also how I was able to simplify the model a little bit more, knowing that we could break that down. So we see a bell type shaped nozzle. However, I'm going to do a first order approximation in my model, where I just assume that it's a cone, because it's easier to do hand calcs off of. So, yes, it could be viewed as cheating a little bit to make this a cone, because it's easier to do hand calcs off of, but one can always add complexity to the model. It takes a lot more time to go backwards.
Yeah, it's I guess, and especially as when you're learning as students, I think it's very important to crawl before you can walk. I mean, that's something
Right.
I've mentioned before, and it's something that keeps coming up over and over again, because you can bring in all the geometric complexity, and then your model fails in some way, or how do you get some pretty pictures, but are they meaningful? And here you have the hand calcs, and so you can build your understanding, and then you can if necessary build in that additional kind of detail in the geometry.
Exactly.
And then you reduced it to, you used periodicity, right? And
Yes, I did. So pulling up the ANSYS model, we have half of a large section, and I'm going to be pulling up the geometry that you've made that shows the entire body.
yes, and students have seen this, so I've gone through
Okay,
this
great.
in the videos, just to because I was doing it myself, to get a sense of, okay, when you cut it and when you make it, like if you make it like a 0.9 degree slice, it becomes difficult to visualize. But here you see exactly
Right.
the relationship between that picture you were showing us of the Saturn V engine and the ANSYS model.
Right. And certainly, if my mother were to look at this, and she were to look at the picture, she would say they don't look the same, son. But she's an artist, and she wants to see more of the features. From an analysis perspective, I want results, and I want them quickly. So I don't need the excess details. And then this is simply what I need. And then going back to what was said about the half model, this is this is like the minimum I can model the system as. I have half of a bolt, and I have half of the channel. If I were to put a mirror on this side, then there would be a half bolt on this side. If I were to put a mirror on this side, we would create the full bolt, and we'd create, we could do that over and over, and recreate the geometry.
And I'll show students how to do the symmetry expansion when we visualize the results. So you can actually bring it up and see ANSYS do that for you. Put the mirror there and kind of do the radial expansion.
Yeah, and that's
Or
super
the
helpful.
circumferential expansion. Yeah.
Exactly. It's super helpful for, like, when my boss comes by, he may not be able to relate to this, but he can certainly relate to this, or even like half of this geometry, where it's easy to see what's inside. Yeah.
Okay. So this is all super useful stuff, Andy. In terms of how do you take a practical problem and reduce it to something where you can do analysis and then get really useful results. So thank you very much for sharing that.
You're very welcome.